made in my mother's womb. When I am laid to rest in a tomb, I find comfort in this thought alone, that I am Christ's and not my own. This is my comfort, this is my joy, this triune triumph, this triune glory. Oh. Christ's precious blood pays for all my sin. He works all things for my salvation. He delivers me from Satan's power. With strength he preserves me every hour. This is my comfort. This is my joy.
Let's try that again. There was some audio issues. Hopefully everybody can hear me now. So, as I was saying, uh, my name is Zachary Kameen, the Curious Christian, and primary reason for starting this is about 15 years ago. I became a Christian due to a Muslim basically making fun of the Bible and making fun of God's Word, making fun of the gospel primarily. And God used that mockery from a Muslim to save me. And after 15 years of, I've been in the army, married, children, and reading, and uh, incidentally, haven't done much in way of uh, looking into particulars when it comes to uh, other religions, other than Islam, because I did a lot of arguing with my Muslim friend, where much of that conversation uh, it was more or less Islam versus Christianity. And I wanted to uh, be able to defend that faith from another monotheistic thing. But at the same time, I was like, okay, uh, not that I doubt my salvation or anything, but the question becomes, how close to the edge, I guess is one way to put it, do you come before uh, you're no longer a Christian in a sense? So testing the boundaries, using Christian liberty to figure that out. Beyond all that, you've got when people are trying to proselytize and evangelize and to bring somebody to their religion, it is typically, in my world, uh, either atheists trying to convince you that there is no God or gods, or it is different monotheistic sects, whether it be Islam or Christianity primarily, who are proselytizing each other to switch. But I noticed that nobody uh, puts any effort to ask the multiplicity people. So, meaning uh, Christians agree that there's only one God, but that there's a multiple of personalities. Islam believes that there's only one God and a unit, only one personality. Uh, but we never go the other direction with respect. And not only that, nobody ever wonders whether or not maybe the uh, people who have the diversity view of God, namely that there's multiple gods or whatever, polytheist pagans, uh, maybe they are right. Uh, Christians agree that Muslims are right in their view of unity in God, uh, but disagree with Muslims about the diversity part because Muslims don't believe that there's a diversity. All Christians do, but that it doesn't affect the unity part, which then lends the desire to find out, okay, well, to what extent are the pagans right? Right? Because they do radically believe in a multiplicity or diversity in the Godhead. And so, to what extent do you give credence or credit to them folks, as it were? And uh, my desire during this these live streams or whatever is to do just that. If you go to my last live, I do believe that my interactions or reactions to the video, which we're going to finish today by Wisdom of Odin, was just that, very respectful. Me pointing out there's disagreements, but they're disagreements by degree, not by kind. Uh, when it comes to uh, Christianity versus paganism, basically, I'm coming in to this with the view that uh, paganism is like I'm not coming in neutral, which is fine. Islam or not Islam, but paganism is a big boy religion, and so can handle somebody coming in who's not neutral. I mean, mainly the point of paganism is that nobody's neutral. There is no neutrality in paganism. There's infighting. It's part of the reason for the belief in the multiple gods is that at the very least that there's a god with multiple conflicting personalities. Uh, that being said, the form of paganism that I decided to start with is my ancestors' paganism, which is Celtic paganism. Uh, Even though the video that we're watching is by a Norse pagan talking about Celtic pagans, their views and practices. We talked about their views last time. Today we're going to talk about the practices, or I'm going to not talk about. I'm going to listen to his talk. I'm going to listen to his talking about their practices, and I'm going to react to it. Uh, I don't know if I actually finished my first thought before squirreling, so I'm coming in not neutral but respectable in that my view as far as what I view that paganism is uh, taking the fifth commandment of honor your father and mother or your superiors, and they elevate it to the first commandment. So they go from just honoring their father and mother to actually worshiping, not their father and mother particularly, but a superior, a king. He actually goes through the list of gods and points and has pointed out that there are particular gods that are one for one a deified king or queen or princess, and so that's part of the reason where uh, I get that view. Uh, that being said, I am certainly listening to it. Uh, I have more enjoyment of my pagan coexisters than most, which means I'm in trouble on both sides. But uh, pagans like me enough. So we're going to get into this discussion. You'll see my face move around a lot because I tried to stay out of the frame, but I do stay in the uh, screen. But you'll see my little picture move around just to allow Wisdom of Odin's uh, work get its full effect. I don't want to diminish. I want to react. I do plan on responding, but I don't want to diminish his work. He did hard work. I mean, he went to Scotland. He went to Germany to work through this, and I don't want to diminish his hard work. I want to be an interlocutor, not a sabotager. So let's get started. Actually, before and pause this real quick. Sorry about that. I am too cheap to get YouTube Premium. Uh, in the last video, we did I did take notes. So again, I am an interlocutor, not just a mindless reactor. Uh, so we've got uh, some of the things. So in the last video, he brought up some of his sources. So he's got uh, Gaelic Wars. He also had uh, Julius Caesar referring to the Celtic pagans as savage, bloody with their bloody sacrifices. I did interact with that, just simply saying that uh, I don't think that he was in a utter uh he wasn't being utterly rude because Romans had bloody sacrifices, right? And so it's not a matter of him insulting them because I mean he at one point was a priest, and so he did bloody sacrifices. So I don't know if he was being insulting when he referred to them. I mean, when he called them savages, I assume that he was being insulting, but the bloody sacrifices part, I don't think he was. Uh, let's go. So some of the things that he brought up was that they didn't write down their own views. Most of the views and stories were written down by Romans or other pagans, as I point out, and Christians, namely Celtic Christians. So the successors or the children of these Celtic uh, men and women who, as a way to honor their fathers and mothers, uh, wrote down what it was that their ancestors believed, which I believe, again, is a matter of the fifth commandment, honor your father and mother. Uh, he brings up also that uh, not everything that they did, they being the Celtic pagans, was recorded, and he didn't totally enjoy that. But I think if you understand the Christian doctrine that the sins of the father will visit the children to the third and fourth generation, and that uh, when we're dealing with children of pagans who, let's say their grandchildren or whatever, uh, their view is, do I really want to revisit the sins of my ancestors too far back where even the Lord doesn't visit? Uh, and so they probably did whitewash some of the more, uh, I don't know, more outrageous blemishes in the record of their ancestors' existence, but kept enough of them to be able to get the point. Again, uh, by their view, so a pagan won't think that they were disgusting, but Christian child of a uh, pagan ancestry family tree will think it uh, more wrong than their ancestors did. He did show uh, that because the gods are primarily gods of nature, uh, the main way to interact with them is to uh, go out in nature, that which their dominion is over, and that you can't interact with them as highly when you are uh, in artifices or in artificial places. He did take us to one place where there was where inauguration for kings in Scotland or of the Scottish tribe uh, was at, and there was a sacrificial bull a couple feet away, probably like a dozen feet away, where more than likely during the inauguration there would be a sacrifice of a sheep, pig, whatever, uh, to consecrate the inauguration. Some of the things, so that's in goodness. So in beauty, some of the things that they produced were ring forts, wraths, that I prefer to call them wraths. I'm writing a whole book that is dedicated to the Celtic wraths. Uh, Celtic druid stones, which uh, the issue with that is that the whole point of a druid stone is that it's an untouched, very large boulder. There's typically nothing ornated on it because the point of it was that it hadn't been touched, and so that's where it was venerated. But the point that it had never been touched is a production, so it's a preservation, and so I believe that into the beauty. Uh, they produce by preservation. Uh, they had vast influence over the barbaric tribes, namely my tribes. And he wrote down a bunch of books. So from the Welsh uh, pagans, you've got the uh, Eben and Goin, however you want to pronounce it. Definitely got it wrong because yeah. You've got the early Irish myths and sagas, the Celts by uh, Alice Roberts, Celtic myths and tales, Cutthroat Celts. And you got Celtic myth and magic by Aidan McCoy. Where he visited was the Donad fort, when I was talking about the inauguration of kings and whatnot. And then you've got carvings and symbols on the stones of that fort. Uh, so again, I brought up you want a minute. So this is paganism is a less of a propagating religion, but more of a preservation religion, as in minimize your artifices so as to enhance the experience you have with God. So uh, that is what I have so far. That's part of the reason why there's not a lot of so was it Roman gods don't have the same attitude or Romans because hence or they believe that the gods also amuse artists and artificers, and so you can work out uh, you can create things for the gods, temples and whatnot. All right, let's get back to it. So, got you all up to Steam. So let's get around. I'm gonna back up a little bit because he's gonna introduce the next portion. Again, my apologies. Let me back up again to here. Let you actually hear his
You can
words.
start doing your research. As always, I apologize for the wind up here, but wrapping up the God section here, another thing that makes God worship and veneration and research really difficult when it comes to Celtic paganism is the fact that it's really hard to determine who is a god and who is not, and who's a hero. So it's just one of those things that you're really going to have to practice. And I want people to go out there and practice, which is why I'm making this video. So in order to practice, you're going to need to know how. So we need to talk about rituals and why we perform rituals, which also means we need to talk about druids. So what does
So there you go. That is basically his summary of the first section. Hence why I split it right there because he did a good job of showing that that was going to be the end of that section. And I do appreciate uh, the wisdom of Odin explaining that and giving me that clean break between uh, truth or uh, what they believed or whatever and practices. We're going to get into the practices now, and uh, it should be interesting.
head to another location and talk about ritual practice within Celtic paganism? So when talking about rituals and the practices of pagans of the Celtic era, all the different peoples there, it can be quite difficult because much like many pagan practices, nothing was written down. And so
So this is a exceptionally important part that he will keep on mentioning that there's nothing written down. The best that they can do is, as far as reconstructing, is hope for the best so that the Romans paid it, who were writing that stuff down, recording their practices, did a good job, and also that Celtic Christians did a good job of recalling how things went, uh, and hoping that a triangulation of other or opposing pagans and uh, honoring Christians get somewhere in their triangulation to somewhere of the truth. Because you can assume that the Roman pagans are going to give a negative view or try to make it look worse than it was. The Celtic Christians are going to whitewash it a bit And so hopefully the whitewashing and the blackwashing come together to kind of create a reconstructive uh, image that he's hoping to show you or show me.
So we have nothing to really say this is definitively the way people gave offerings, let alone, individuals and groups. Like, we know some about the group offerings, some about the holidays and things like that. But the most information we get from the Celtic side is from the Druids, which are pretty predominantly known and were heavily written about by Julius Caesar in his works. Slightly mentioned once again by Tacitus, but for the most part we get a lot of our information from Julius Caesar. There are many Druidic orders that exist today that have tried to revive the teachings of the Druids, but there's a few problems with that that I want to discuss, but also I think I have the perfect place to talk about the Druids, and that is a stone circle that is actually labeled as a Druid stone, a Druid temple. This entire area, everything around here, is called Druid something, the Druid cottages, the Druid temple, because of this area right here.
This is you trying to book a trip on your business travel plan.
All right, so let's recap since he wants to have an ad right there. He's making the good point that you're grabbing from the most radical of the pagans, and so grabbing from the most radical of the pagans, which are the Druids, which fair enough, they were basically full-time worshippers of the pagan gods, and so you can assume again that a triangulation of Druids still telling what they're doing, Romans giving a blackwash, Christians giving a whitewash, and hopefully somewhere in there you can get what would be a common person, a peasant, such as all of us. What would the peasantry of the pagan world, just a basic farmer, what would their general practices be?
Amazing things I have to show you here is the fact that this Druid temple is covered in oak trees. And the reason that's important is because it's one of the few aspects of Druids that we know, is that they saw oak trees as sacred, as connections to the other world. And so many of their rituals were held around oak trees. And
All right, we're going to write that down. Okay. So, real quick, rituals were often performed oak trees. In fact, I'm going to put this over here. Believe that oak trees, how did he word it?
to show you here is the fact that this Druid temple is covered in oak trees. And the reason that's important is because it's one of the few aspects of Druids that we know, is that they saw oak trees as sacred, as connections to the other world. And so many of
All right. Or sacred connections to the other world. So we mentioned druid stones, cottages, rings, etc.
their rituals were held around oak trees, and oak trees were a central part. So that is something that we can pull out for Celtic pagans that want to practice today, is oak trees are definitely going to be a place that you want to go to perform your rituals. Now, stone circles would also be a really good place to do it, and you may have to build your own if you have your own land. But this stone circle here in particular is very impressive. I've seen a few on this trip now, and this one really has a presence to it. And so you can make assumptions here. You can
And let me point out, look at the size of them stones. Like, those were maybe carted from across, but maybe just rolled to the location by a a few industrious druids. Maybe you know, got like a few strong men to help pick it up, but more than likely they just rolled them over to this spot. And you've got the ring, or let me get over here. You've got the ring of them, but then you've got this inner ring where they might have done fires, or they might have just sat there, or druids sat out here, and then like the main druid sat in here. It's like a central place. Uh, like these things were maybe savagely thought out, but you can't say they weren't thought out. At the very least, there was enough intentionality to want to roll uh, these. It wasn't just impulsive; it was definitely compulsive. What compelled them? Uh, well, he'd probably argue that the gods compelled them to do it.
make assumptions that over here by the big central pillar and the platform right there, that offerings were made there, but we don't know.
There you go.
And offerings at this time would come in the form of animal or human sacrifice, according to Julius Caesar. Now, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this isn't necessarily proof or, the truth about Druidic paganism or Druids in general is the fact of animal and human sacrifice. This is something that from the Viking age that we see a lot of people focusing on. We have to remember that Julius Caesar was writing these things not to show them as beautiful people with a wonderful culture. He was trying to get them seen as savages. So a lot of the information would have been focused on the savagery and that they were different than the Romans. What I really want to focus on is the act of giving offerings, because this is something that is pretty common among many pagan traditions, including Norse paganism.
So that's what I was pointing out before, that Julius Caesar was blackwashing them in a sense uh, because of rivalry, right? So they weren't uh, just because you're pagans doesn't mean you're friends. Right? Let me say that again. Just because you're pagans doesn't mean you're friends. Part of the reason for paganism is a view of enmity between the gods. Uh, Part of the deal when it comes to a Christian understanding of the Trinity is that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit have no enmity with each other. While with pagan views of the gods is that one of the main principles is enmity between the gods.
And of course, yes, we can say animal sacrifice and human sacrifice, but obviously we don't do those things in this modern age. The only thing animal sacrifice, if you do own, like this farmer here, he has his own animals. Obviously, he has to butcher them to get their meat. And so if you have animals that you actually own and you actually run a farm, then animal sacrifice could still be an option. But for the majority of people following this faith today, following Celtic paganism, they're going to give votive offerings, which essentially means offerings that do not kill something in the process. Now, this still can be meat that you buy from a grocery store, but you're not actively killing the animal. You're not actively draining the blood. And this is something that I have seen other places. Actually, in Germany, I was at Druid stones or supposed Druid stones.
Right. And because there's no uh, standard practice, you can get away with that. If there was a standard practice book, and there are, you know, Wiccans or whatever witches who have their own books, who have their own standards, which have a call for blood sacrifices, but that's not all, and yeah, can be that's granted. Uh, just because there are because there's not a standard practice. Again, part of the point of paganism is that there is a radical diversity within the Godhead, uh, of warring factions, a fractured deity, and those fractures do not get along with each other. There may be uh, armistices for celebrations, but that's about it. And so that means that if you are a god who is inclined to Bridget, you're probably not doing human sacrifices. You may be doing like fruit offerings and things like that. But that does not apply to all of the other gods who are very much at war with each other. It's in pagan view. And so, yeah, there are some gods in this view that are perfectly content with uh, votive offerings, but are those considered the strong gods? I don't know.
That had cuts in the rock to collect some form of liquid. It's not a long jump to say that possibly this was blood for animal sacrifices. Sorry for the rain. I mean, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to film at a druidic temple.
You don't have to say sorry for the rain when you're in Scotland. There's only rainy days in Scotland.
A supposed druidic temple in the rain. I mean,
This game.
Nobody cares about the game. So, but yeah, so we're dealing with, I think, a very well intentioned and well crafted video so far. I do appreciate Wisdom of Odin for creating it. Hold on, let me get up, back it in. I do hope you will forgive me for the constant muting. I just don't think you really care to listen to
I couldn't
advertisements.
pass up the opportunity to film at a druidic temple, a supposed druidic temple in the rain. I mean, what an amazing place to talk about this. But looking out here and just seeing it, you can really picture what could have happened. We don't know the details. Looking at, I mean, this is the memory of a group of people, of the spiritual leaders that once, you know, led these people, led these faiths. And the Druids were far beyond just spiritual leaders. They were also advisors, politicians, lawmakers, craftsmen. There was so much to.
Right. And so this is where the especially in the barbaric, we'll say, the northwestern Europeans, where we get the idea of separation of church and state. Druids are free entities. Uh, that's not to say that they were uninfluential, as he mentions. They were advisors. And so the main purpose of the Druids is that they are a specific type of people uh, that, for religious reasons, are basically untouchable. The magistrates, the kings, leave them alone and will listen and usually do what they can to heed the words of the druids. Similarly, in today's age, you still have pagan influencers influencing politicians, but even beyond that, you've got pastors who have influence over the magistrates here in America, especially, and throughout the world, depending on uh, the the main or official religion. You'll see it play out in their own individual ways. Uh, One of the uh, primary features is an independence of mind and an independence of financials. So usually, uh, these type of people, whether druids in uh, paganism or in our day, uh, these spiritual influencers are typically debt free. I know it's a crass modern thing to say, but debt free. They didn't owe anybody anything, so you don't have to worry about them. Their words being the words of their creditors. Uh, they are usually um, sparse in their living, so are vows of poverty or something to that effect. Uh, they're certainly below their means that they could with their charisma. And they tend to be charismatic, and they usually have a FU attitude, meaning they tend to not really care if the government were to threaten them, and so that's why the government typically doesn't threaten them. Because what's the point? You can't bribe them, you can't threaten them, and they're going to tell you your moral quandaries. Uh, and another thing is they are typically non-interventionists. It's like they won't cross the uh, line when it comes to church and state. We'll use church and state for our sake. Like they're not going to come in with their guns and say, uh, bow down to this God or else. With the desire, the reciprocal, the state isn't going to do the same thing. Uh, but depending on which pagan god, specifically for the Celts, uh, will depend on the behavior. So, like, not all druids worship the same god, and by worship I mean served. So their life was to seek to best glorify their specific god. So if there was a druid or druidess, but almost always druid, uh, who worshipped again Brigid, probably the most laid back person or druid and just very uh, solid, but not all of in their view that would be enough to please that particular goddess or god. But again, is she considered one of the strong gods? And if not, that's fine if you're not looking for a strong god to like, do something. But if you're needing strong, if you've got a strong god problem, you need strong god solutions. And so therefore, shift in the services may be required.
The druids that we do not know, and they had so many aspects of society. And one of the reasons we don't know that much about them outside of Julius Caesar's writings is because the druids, as said by Julius Caesar, did not write anything down, that they actually were against writing things down, that they wanted to pass things orally. And so, of course, this makes it very difficult to research a group of individuals that led a religious society when they didn't write anything down. So really, we're just left with the memories of what they used to do. There is no signs about this place, this druid temple here, but if it's anything like the other stone circles I've seen here, it's within the thousands of years old. So it actually could not be Celtic. It could be prehistory, pre-Celtic people here in Scotland. So ultimately, we do not know that much about ritual practice from this time, but we do know about this mystery of the Druids. And like I said, Druidism is still something that is practiced today. And again, these groups bring on their new life and they have to fill in the blanks because that is what has to happen. But our actual knowledge of what they did is very limited. We know oak trees, we know mistletoe was important, we know sacrifices and offerings were important, we know they had various roles in society, we know they were fairly high ranking in society, and that they were very feared by their opponents. This is something that was written by Tacitus. Oh, I need to switch arms. I couldn't bring my tripod. So this was something that was written by Tacitus, is that the Druids were very feared in war. When the Romans went against them here in the British Isles, they would be a part of the war band. They would chant spells.
Yep. So this was part of what I was referring to when have strong God problems, you'll need strong God solutions. And so uh the struggle will become, so like a druid typically is somebody who is seeking to serve the strong gods, and that takes a lot of sacrifice, as it were. But it makes them a formidable opponent against other pagans who uh, typically are not worshiping stronger gods. And so uh, he's mentioning here that they were in the front lines. They were typically uh, calling upon their uh, gods to intercept and intervene, or using the powers that those uh, stronger gods provided for them so as to uh, inflict harm upon other pagans. Because the main staple of paganism is typically enmity.
They would, murmur ancient spells and scary things that would scare the Romans, and the Romans didn't want to fight them. I mean, the Celtic people were a very warlike people, and the Druids were a part of that. The Druids were a part of creating that terror and that magic. And the Romans really saw their magic as a thing that they had to actually worry about, and the Druids were at the center of that magic. So again, I wish I could give you more details specifically about the history of all this, but I just simply can't. And not as a practicing Celtic pagan myself, I don't want to overstep my bounds, but I will share as a Norse pagan, I think the way we give offerings is very similar. We have a moment, we call to whatever we're calling to, we go to a place like this, or we go to a place in our own homes, or within our own homes, we thank a deity, we thank an ancestor, we thank a spirit, and then we give an offering and maybe talk with them, ask for something, ask for guidance. And that's a basic pagan practice. I think that's something that transitions not only Norse paganism and Celtic paganism, but many pagan practices, including Wicca. And so yes, historically, it's going to be very, very hard to practice Celtic paganism as close to historically accurate as possible, unless you're going to go to places like this and start sacrificing animals and people, because that's what Julius Caesar told you to do. But I don't...
All right. So druids tended to be in the warband, murmuring spells and incantations, typically offerings include offering uh, not incorporation, something to the effect of calling upon and giving thanks to deity, ancestor, spirit, and making supplication. Now, here's a thing that I'm curious about. Does uh Wisdom of Odin, you use weird language here where you say, let me see if I can find it.
As possible, unless you're going to go to places like this and start sacrificing animals and people, because that's what Julius Caesar told you to do.
No, further back.
We thank a deity, we thank an ancestor, we thank a spirit, and scary things that would scare the Romans and the various
There you
roles in
go.
society.
Yeah,
We know
here
they
we
were
go.
fairly high-ranking in society, and that they were very feared by their opponents. This is something that was written by Tacitus. Oh, I need to switch arms. I couldn't bring my tripod. So this was something that was written by Tacitus, is that the Druids were very feared in war. When the Romans went against them here in the British Isles, they would be a part of the war band. They would chant spells. They would, murmur ancient spells and scary things that would scare the Romans. And the Romans didn't want to fight them. I mean, the Celtic people were a very warlike people, and the Druids were a part of that. The Druids were a part of creating that terror and that magic. And the Romans really saw their magic as a thing that they had to actually worry about, and the Druids were at the center of that magic. So again, I wish I could give you more detail.
So here's yeah, you're very ambiguous on it. I'm curious if you actually believed that their spells worked, like actual power, actual spell casting was done. I'm not talking Harry Potter-esque deals, but actual power. I would partly argue that, yeah, I mean, as a Christian, I have no reason to doubt that uh, pagan spell casting was and is a thing. The only thing that uh, I would disagree with, not here, but if anybody who's afraid as a Christian uh, of spell casting from pagans, like Christians can't be touched by pagan spells, so Christians don't really give a crap, or at least they shouldn't. Like the it's the whole well, one you've got the Apostle John talking about how the devil can't touch you. You got the Lord Jesus talking about Satan casting out Satan, and so the a household that's divided will fall. And that is partly talking about right there that there is a war like effect with these fallen angels. And I'm showing my hand on this, but I haven't hid the fact that I do believe that the uh, pagan gods are enmity with each other, and I think the reason why they're at enmity is because they are what uh, Christians refer to as devils or demons. Uh, I mean, that's demon is a pagan word that typically refers to, I don't know, was it uh, basically the image of a god? Uh, so like you've got greater Zeus, but then you've got so this is like what is it? Plato's view. So like nobody's ever seen the gods, but they see like their glory wrapped up basically. Uh, they wear like a cloak, and so you've got that. So there's even that concept in certain pagan teachings. But Christian view is that they're fallen angels who have power. Angels have power. Humans have power. We're image bearers of God, and so that uh, image bearing of God has power within it. The thing that keeps the power back is uh, our sin primarily and lack of faith. By faith, I've asked the Lord to stop a nasty thunderstorm that was ruining my family's my brother, or my two brothers and my nephew. We went camping, and it was a terrible thunderstorm that's supposed to last the whole weekend long that we were supposed to be there. And I simply prayed to the Lord and gave worship, gave thanks for when he was going to stop it, and the rain stopped. It was still going on around our whole area except for our campsite. The on Basically the whole time, well, I'll take that back. The whole day, uh, again, except like literally the storm was surrounding our area, except for like our half-mile radius, so that we could do whatever we wanted. And the storm came back in after we had this huge raging fire, and then it was the fire that night that we were making marshmallows and hot dogs and stuff on. Uh, it was so hot that it made it to where anybody who was by the fire was fine because it was evaporating the rain uh, before it hit us. And so I was literally sleeping outside by the fire in a sleeping bag. Never got cold, never got wet. It was awesome. My brother and my nephew slept in a tent, and their whole tent was soaked. They were fine because they were in a tent, but uh, it was just awesome uh, to see God work by just simply asking him, "Hey, can you stop the rain?" And in my opinion, he was like, "Well, I'm not going to stop the rain because there are people who need the rain because it's rains." We were in a farmland area where we were at was woods, but farms around, and they need the rain. So why would God create a drought just to provide his child a good time? But he was kind enough to stop the rain where it didn't need to be, and he let the farmland area continue to get the rain and allow his children to uh, enjoy time of camping simply because I asked in Jesus' name. So like, because I know that I've got power because of that, or that the Lord has power, that just simply ask him. It's not uh, a way for me to think that angels, fallen or not, also have power and uh, can provide such powers to uh, men, whether they're believers or non-believers. Uh, it's not outside of those possibilities, and I will not deny such a thing could be possible.
Details specifically about the history of all this, but I just simply can't. And not as a practicing Celtic pagan myself, I don't want to overstep my bounds, but I will share as a Norse pagan, I think the way we give offerings is very similar. We have a moment, we call to whatever we're calling to, we go to a place like this, or we go to a place in our own homes, or within our own homes, we thank a deity, we thank an ancestor, we thank a spirit, and then we give an offering and maybe talk with them, ask for something, ask for guidance. And that's a basic pagan practice. I think that's something that transitions not only Norse paganism and Celtic paganism, but many pagan practices, including Wicca. And so yes, historically, it's going to be very, very hard to practice Celtic paganism as close to historically accurate as possible unless you're going to go to places like this and start sacrificing animals and people, because that's what Julius Caesar told you to do. But I don't think we should necessarily listen to Julius Caesar. And you're going to have to build your own practices based on this foundation from thousands of years ago. Again, human society has evolved, and so therefore the spiritual practices will have to evolve as well. But I wanted to give this to you. If you want to research more into the Druids, like I said, there's many things out there, but keep in mind that a lot of our actual knowledge about about them comes from Julius Caesar and a few artifacts, and of course studying and making theories about places like this. But yeah, I think that's all I have to cover on rituals and offerings. If you haven't caught on to this theme yet, I'm really big in simplifying things down and then expanding from there. So your very simple offering, call to the deity, call to whoever you're calling to, give the offering, have that conversation, ask for your guidance, and thank them and send them back to where they came from.
Hey, I'm Mark Webster from...
Hi, Mark Webster. Please stop talking. All right, we'll let it play out. But yeah, so that's pretty cool. All right, bring you back. Yeah, so pretty solid stuff. And again, there's not a far removal of practice in Christian prayer life. Obviously, the Lord Jesus, in our estimation, is the once and for all sacrifice, and so we don't need to give an offering to our God, because we believe that our God provided the offering. So pray in Jesus' name. But same idea, acknowledging the Lord, speak with him, read his word. Unlike the Druids and whatnot, they're what we have the written down. So if you get hang up on the Bible, just view it in this, that Christian Druids, Christian religious leaders did write down. We didn't need an outside force like a Julius Caesar telling the world what it was that we did. Uh, my spiritual ancestors, the Jewish people and then the Christian people, uh, wrote down exactly what they did. You've got the Torah, and you have the histories, you have the prophets, you have the Psalms, you have the wisdom literature, you have the Gospels, you have the letters, you have the Revelation. All, and then you go into church history, you've got the Didache, you've got, which is basically the teaching, the practices of the early church, and you go from there. So we didn't it wasn't a mystery religion. There was no view that you don't write it down by these druids or these priests. They weren't shy about it. And it was obviously certainly was bloody and savage in a sense. And we have uh I mean, I'm grateful that the Lord Jesus came because of him coming, me as a Gentile, me as a Celtic successor, have been brought in. The curtain was torn from the temple, the wall of partition that broke away Jews and Gentiles has fallen and has allowed for people like me, who are Gentile by nature and by upbringing, to come before the throne room of not just the strong God, but the God of strength.
A basic pagan ritual that I think you can build any practice off of, including a Celtic one. So one thing I know a lot of people are going to ask when it comes to Celtic paganism, and the reason I say this is because a lot of people asked it when I got into Norse paganism, and in fact it was one of the first questions I got asked, is if there was any moral code. So Christianity has sinning and not sinning, and and atoning for your sins, and then Norse paganism a little bit has the honor code, and then what is told to us in the Have 'em All. Sadly, from what I can tell in Celtic paganism and Celtic culture, there really isn't something ancient that is written down. Nothing like the Have 'em All saying like these are the ways to live by. And again, not at least in the pagan way of life. And the reason I say this is because I would say like Highland culture would be a really good one to look at. Like Highland culture is very entrenched. It has an identity. It has a tradition, and those things more than likely came from a pagan source, from an ancient source. And so a lot of the things that are still held as important to Highland people, to the people that live here now, and to even Highland culture in the last 1,000 years, are things that probably would have been held as important to people in the pagan era. And this spot right here is a good example of that. This is the MacDonald War Memorial, or the massacre here at Glencoe. So the MacDonald clan and its leader were, and it's
All right, so pause real quick. This is with it. There is something to, like I mentioned before, triangulation. There is something to the simple honoring of your father and mother by continuing the habits uh, that do help point beyond itself. So was it C.S. Lewis brought up the fact that, look at the beauty of the tree. Why do we call it beautiful? There's nothing in a tree that tells us, like the atoms in it that are colorless, the waves that strike the atoms and then shoot back to our eyes and go into our brain, and then it gets interpreted as beautiful. Why do we call it beautiful? Why use that word? And he argues because it points beyond itself. I do want to uh, bring up, uh, was it this simple uh, Celtic habits and honored rituals. That's a beauty. Like, so that is a thing that to this day is still being passed down, and so we recognize that as a beautiful thing.
Klansmen were massacred here by the Campbells in the 1600s, and this was erected in the 1800s as a way to remember them. And something we learn from the Norse is the importance of remembrance of your ancestors. And so doing things like this, even though it is Christian, clearly noted from the cross at the top, is still a way culturally to maintain your identity. And again, honoring your ancestors is something that does come from pagan roots, and something we do have evidence of within ancient Celtic beliefs. Because, I mean, I literally last night was at a burial mound, nothing significant that I need to talk about besides the fact that it's 4,500 years old. And so remembering your ancestors and doing things to honor them is something that comes from the ancient past that is carried on into modern tradition. It also helps that the view here at Glencoe is pretty amazing. Also, there's Kevin. Kevin, you finally snuck in the video.
There's finally a better way. It's called Otter. Let's say I'm in class.
Let's say you're not in class. So play this out again. No, it's pretty solid. Again, I do appreciate. Here, bring me up, Scotty.
It also helps that the view here at Glencoe is pretty amazing. Also, there's Kevin. Kevin, you finally snuck in the video. But yeah, the view here is amazing. And I did want to mention, we drove by a youth hostel here that you can rent out, a couple of them. And so we're really pushing our UK fellowship leader, Terry, to have a Fellowship of Northern Traditions gathering here in Scotland in Glencoe, because it's absolutely mind-bogglingly beautiful. So if you want to join one of our gatherings that we have now in the UK, make sure you check out our Fellowship of Northern Traditions website. And when we do say Northern Traditions, we also mean Norse Paganism, Celtic Paganism, and Slavic Paganism. We're really honoring the gods that have come from Northern Europe. And so Celtic gods have been brought into rituals before in the past, just recently at the UK.
All right, so I'll be kind, but you want to be careful, because again, one of the points of paganism being a thing is that there is enmity between the personifications of God, the shards of deity, as it were. And so grouping, the enmity does not get quieter simply because you bring in other gods who are also fighting each other.
UK gathering we just had here like a week ago, Kevin brought up the god Lugh, which is a Celtic deity. And so it's something we are interested in bringing in our community. While we are primarily focused on the Norse deities, it is something that we are bringing in. So if you're interested in joining us for our gatherings, we will hopefully be having one here in Glencoe, as long as we can make Terry come up this far north. I mean, but seriously, look how beautiful that is. One of the biggest questions we ask when getting into religion or questioning our nature in the universe is, where do we go when we die? And to a Norse pagan like myself, we believe in things such as Valhalla or Helheim, or just the different halls of the gods. To Christians, heaven and hell, nirvana for others. But for the Celtic pagans, it is a little bit different. So I found a perfect location to talk about the afterlife as well as the life celebrations that they held during the holy days. And that is this barrow. So at
All right. So first thing, brought up the barrow. So I put that in beauty because that is a thing that they created. So we're going to deal with afterlife. So I'm just going to get that written down now. And I will point out for Celtics, Celtic pagans, so as to distinguish between them and myself, who is a Celtic Christian. And I want to make mention on the outset that there is a third thing when it comes to a Christian perspective of the afterlife, which is the resurrection, where our body rejoins our spirit, is glorified, and we then live eternity back on earth as glorified beings. So it's not as simple as heaven and hell, but it's a matter of returning back to earth and making it fruitful, bearing good fruit back on this garden planet. We live in a universe that is a wilderness. As far as we know, the earth is the only garden that we have, and we are called to continue to grow this garden. And part of the means by which doing that will be spreading the garden out to other lands or other planets. But that is my view as far as that goes. The new heavens and new earth bit, the resurrection is a standard Christian doctrine. The view that I have of it being a continuation of, okay, now that we've resurrected, now that we have the new heavens and new earth, time to be fruitful again, like actually bearing fruit, tending the ground, this doing that which the Druids only longed to see, where we actually are not just maintaining, but glorifying, beautifying the earth that is now no longer affected by sin.
Burial mound that has been hollowed out and has a hollow entrance as well. This is one of the coolest pagan sites I have ever been to in my life. Might be the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. So some of the history about this barrow, real quick. So it does have a stone circle that goes all the way around it. Beautiful vistas around it as well. Inside, so it's over 4,000 years old. Inside was a woman, but the body was not there. It was just the imprint, like the memory of someone. The body had long decayed. But also there was a ceremonial practice to it. So I guess there were thousands of quartz shards found within here, which suggest, according to the sign over here, that this was a very ceremonial religious burial. Now, again, we do not know what deities the people that put this here followed. This is not necessarily a Celtic burial. This is not necessarily a Celtic pagan thing. This is something from the pre-people, from the people that were here before. And so again, that's one of the things that makes Celtic paganism so difficult, is actually like figuring these things out, because we don't know what deities or what practices were followed here. Let me take you to the top of the barrel, which is allowed. It does say it is allowed, before someone questions me on that. But up here is really the really cool part. So tell me you don't get some serious Skyrim vibes from this. I've never seen this. I've seen several burial mounds across the world, but I've never seen one with an open entrance on the roof like this. Absolutely incredible, amazing, magical. Again, stone circle all the way around.
Be kind to you. I'm gonna scoot back again and then move my screen so that you can see the whole. That was my bad for watching it myself and not letting you see. Scooch back up.
Anyways, let us talk about Celtic paganism.
Okay.
Is really the really cool part. So tell me you don't get some serious Skyrim vibes from this. I've never seen this. I've seen several burial mounds across the world, but I've never seen one with an open entrance on the roof like this. Absolutely incredible, amazing, magical. Again, stone circle all the way around. Anyways, let us talk about Celtic paganism, at least European Celtic paganism, what we understand. Hopefully you're getting the gist towards the end of this video here. So burial practices, typically mound, typically given back to the earth. That is where we're going to get a lot of the ideas of the afterlife. But we also get some of those ideas from the Druids that we mentioned in the writings of Julius Caesar. It seems that the Druids promoted and practiced an idea of reincarnation, that giving up a life here meant a life was born elsewhere. So typically that was also in the family line, the ancestral line. And from what I've been able to tell, there is the idea of the other world. So in most religions, there typically is an upper world and a lower world. And from what I can tell from most Celtic paganism, it seems that there is an idea of the other world, but there isn't necessarily an idea of the lower world and the upper world, like many religions. And so for the most part, when you die here, you go to the other world, and then a life is born here. And so it goes back and forth, like a transition of energy between our world and their world. So definitely this idea of reincarnation, particularly the family line, seems to be something that is prevalent to Celtic tradition. And otherwise, there's very little information on Celtic deities of the dead, Celtic...
Yeah, so get back over here. We got the other world. And I assume probably say something to the effect of like intermediate stay and reincarnation. Reincarnation as opposed to resurrection, which is Christian view. So
deities of the afterlife, or what their afterlife would be otherwise. And once again, a lot of the information comes from these burial mounds. And again, this isn't necessarily a Celtic burial mound. This is a burial mound that just so happens to be in a Celtic place. So very difficult. When getting into Celtic paganism and you're wondering, where do I go when I die? I think the answer really is this idea of reincarnation. So live a good life here, and then hopefully the rewards of this life carry you to the next. One thing that we have found across burial mounds, Celtic and the like, is this idea of offerings, giving offerings to the next life, or something to take with you to the next life. Again, something we see in the Norse tradition as well as the Celtic tradition. The burial mound we saw last night had an offering bowl that had a liquid in it that was buried with the person. And so this idea of having something to take with you to the next life seems to be something that carries over many cultures and traditions, including in Celtic tradition. So I do actually want to take you inside of the barrow here, which once again is allowed.
All right, so that is interesting. So is it buried with we'll just say precious possession, and we're assuming precious. We'll even put a question mark. And that might just be as simple as, in their view, again, pagan is typically that there's a form of enmity between the gods and typically between humans and the gods. And so perhaps the possession that they're bringing is a kind of peace offering, so as to let a particular god let them through, an appeasement, as it were. But like he said, we're just guessing here.
So I will take you down here. It is very low, but I really just want to give you this experience so you can join me.
Anything taller would
I
probably
haven't been
cave
here
in.
yet, so it is very low to the ground. But once again, we are allowed to go in here.
And
So
you can even see it
Let's do it.
cracking.
How do you take 20,000 children in the middle of New York City without anybody?
Nobody cares. How do you pause a video? All right, cool. Killing it. So, I hope again you will indulge me and appreciate my uh my reacting, my responses, but not my like raging out about what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing. I'm not trying to be overtly disrespectful or anything like that. I am just simply expressing my uh moment by moment uh responses to the information that's given to me at that time. Because obviously, if I don't say anything, you won't know what I'm thinking. I do find it interesting. I assume that these were put in later. I, but or at least replaced. Replacing. I don't know. Because they look like they're metal. As just support beams. To keep it from collapsing. Um, that'd be my guess. Pretty cool. Hi, Kevin.
Of course I had to. So just because we can come in here and it says that we're allowed, but according to the rules, doesn't mean that we don't go that extra pagan step. And so this is something we obviously already talked about in this video, is the idea of offerings. I can't show you the source material that says you need to give an offering to the burial mound when you're there and visit.
Right. So, was it one of the cool things, assuming the resurrection, which I am, uh, how cool. So let me pull up a song that I wrote, and this is more or less self-aggrandizing, and so I do apologize. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Is it moat? Is that how I spelled it? Yes, I did. Huzzah. So this song. My shadow weighs down in the gloom, or is it just all in my head? What if the wrath doesn't have room? Will I rest tonight without a bed? Before my eyes I beheld a trench encircling a hill crowned with spears. Downwind of the wrath I smelled death's stench, with the cries of torture in my ears. The bridge across the moat was broken, with a sign that says you must go through. I closed my eyes and dived for distance, and when I surfaced, the sky was blue. I hear a still small voice ringing in my ear. What you're looking for can only be found here. So, we're going to leave it there, but I do hope and pray you guys have a great day. Take care.
All creation sang, the spheres of the heavens rang, the serpent plagues were sown. Adam said our voice off tone. In the beginning, God made us good to the praise of His glorious grace. Within creation, song Adam stood to lead the choir of His race. How could God be wrong to tell man to join the song? All creation sang, the spheres of the heavens rang, serpent plagues were sown. Adam said our voice off tone. As the devil sang his serpent song, he asked our mother to sing his tune, bragging that learning may take too long, but he knows a way should be good by noon. How could God be wrong to tell men to join the song? All creation sang, the spheres of the heavens rang, serpent plagues were sown. Adam said our voice off tone. The serpent seduced her to the tree that the Lord forbade to consume. Her husband joined her in the mutiny, cursing her womb a spiritual tomb. How could God be wrong to tell men to join the song? All creation sang, the spheres of the heavens rang, the serpent plagues were sown. Adam said our voice off tone. How could God be wrong to tell men to join the song? All creation sang, the spheres of the heavens rang, serpent plagues were sown. Adam said our voice off tone.